According to statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau, several minority groups in America out-earn white people. They earn more money than white people. These are the groups. Ready? Pakistani Americans, Lebanese Americans, South African Americans, Filipino Americans, Sri Lankan Americans, and Iranian Americans. And the number one group in the United States for earnings, Indians. They earn more money than anyone else.
You have Patrick Bet-David from Valuetainment, who's talking about why Indians do so well against Americans in the United States, and how, for some strange reason, they're crushing it in the United States and they're out-competing and outdoing everybody. There seems to be this thing now that's going along where people are trying to make it seem as if immigrants from other countries are coming into the United States and just taking over, and that's not true at all. But we'll let them talk about it, and I'll come in from time to time. So let's go.
And the ethnic group of Indians in America are crushing every other ethnic group in America, not by 5%, not by 10%, by 20% in income. We have stats on their divorce rates against everybody else. We have stats on how they raise their kids. We have stats on how they put their kids in certain majors over other majors. It's just mind-boggling.
Well, it's maybe mind-boggling to you, but here's the thing. If Indian immigrants are crushing it in the United States of America, then how is it they're not crushing it in India, in their country where they come from? I mean, India is like the poster child for poverty throughout the world. So if they're really crushing it in the United States, how is it they're not crushing it in India? But I'll let you keep talking.
Again, everybody else is going to learn a ton about how Indians raise their kids. So income is one of the ways to measure who's more successful than others, okay? This is according to the U.S. Census Bureau, where Indian Americans rank amongst other ethnic groups. If you look at this chart here, this is 2018, Indians all the way at the top at $120,000 income. Taiwanese is number 2. They're ahead of them by nearly 25%, 24%. Chinese third, Japanese fourth, then it's Pakistani, Filipino, Indonesian, Korean, Cambodian, Hmong, and then Vietnamese, and look where white Americans are at $65,000. Indians make $55,000 per year than white Americans.
That is because they work longer hours. Because where these people come from, a 21-hour workday is very, very, very normal. So once they get to the United States and they realize that, wow, I'm only expected to work 8 hours a day if I want to, but hey, I can also work 21 hours a day if I feel like, well, then that's what they're going to do, because that's how it is in their country. And not only that, but in their country, they work 21 hours a day and they get paid absolutely nothing. Now they can work in the United States and work 21 hours a day and make money. The average American, especially the average white American, has realized that the way life has been for his parents and his grandparents, that's not the way life is for them today. So what they've decided to do is just live in their mother's basement and smoke weed and do crystal meth all day. Because as far as they're concerned, the juice is not worth the squeeze in today's economy. It's just not worth it. If you're used to living a certain lifestyle and you're used to living like that for years and years and years and years and years, then what you expect in terms of opportunity is more, not less. So if you're not getting more, or if you're not getting the same things as your parents and grandparents, well, obviously, you're going to want to work less. And someone who comes in from a country where, taking a dump in a toilet outside is the norm, now they get to the United States and they can go to the bathroom and take a dump inside. That's a luxury. Now they turn their lights on, and all of a sudden you got electricity 24 hours a day, every single day, without fail. So obviously what that's going to do for them, it's going to allow them to save more time. Because if you have to walk 4 miles or 5 hours to get water, and 5 hours to take that water back to your home so you can take a shower, and now you're in the United States where all you have to do is just turn your tap on, then that extra 8 hours that you spend taking water back and forth in your village to your home just to take a shower, now you have that much more time where you just automatically work and earn more money. So I don't understand what Patrick's talking about here. what he's saying here makes absolutely no sense. So I don't know if he's trying to sell something to someone. Maybe this guy's trying to get a lot of Indians to feel extra good about themselves so they can vote Democrat. I don't know, but we'll continue.
By the way, white Americans, you're trying to go to 4 days a week work week.
Yeah, we're trying to go to 4 days, a 4-day work week. The reason why Americans want to work less is because, like I said before, the juice is not worth the squeeze anymore. First of all, you got $1 that's valued at absolutely nothing now. Back in the day, in the United States, we had real manufacturing. Now those manufacturing jobs have now gone out to places like China. There's nothing that a country like China can manufacture that Americans can't manufacture themselves. But this is a corporate decision and a government decision. These decisions were made by corporations along with government which actually allows these companies on the stock market to be able to raise the value of their shares to make it look as if it's worth more than it's actually worth. And by doing so, what they've had to do is take manufacturing jobs outside of the United States and send these jobs to China. This guy's supposed to be a businessman. He ought to know this.
Try convincing an immigrant coming from India, Taiwan, China, Japan, Pakistan, Filipino, Indonesian, Korean, Cambodian, Persian, Hmong, Vietnamese, try to convince them to only work 4 days a week.
They're not going to work 4 days a week. As a matter of fact, I'm going to let them continue right here.
Not their kids who are born here, maybe.
And you just said it right there. You just said it right there, Patrick Bet David. The thing about it is that you can't convince these Cambodians and Chinese kids and Japanese kids and Indonesian kids and Indian kids who were born in the United States. You're not going to be able to convince them to work 21 hours a day. And you just said exactly what I just said. So what are you really saying?
Maybe. And they've been Americanized. Try convincing an immigrant to only work 4 days a week.
And that's the key word right there, Americanized. That's it right there. Because kids who were born in the United States of immigrant parents, they no longer, as a matter of fact, most of them don't even speak their country's home language. They just speak English. So you're not going to try to convince them to work 21 hours. You're not going to try to convince them to work as quote unquote hard as their parents, because once they're born in the United States, their point of reference changed from their parents to their competitors, who are also Americans born in the United States, whether they're from immigrant parents or not, and because that is their direct competition. So they're going to think just like them, they're going to act just like them, because that's how pop culture is designed to influence people. So what you're saying, I mean, this is like a nothing burger, Patrick, but let's keep going.
An immigrant to only work 4 days a week. They will laugh at you. The whole purpose of coming to America is that they can work as much as they want. It's called free enterprise.
No, it's called having absolutely nothing. When you have absolutely nothing and you get to a country where you have a little bit of something, you're all in.
But let's kind of take a deep dive with some of these other stats. Indian population living in poverty amongst percentage-wise with Americans. All Americans, roughly 13% of Americans live in poverty. All 8.
That's because Indian immigrants that come to the United States and Canada, you have like 20 people living in a 2-room apartment building. That's what it is. It's not unheard of to have 10, 11, 12, 14 Indian people living in a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment in the United States. And they'll do that for years and years and years and years, because that's how they live in India.
Asians, it's 10%. Look at Indians. Only 6% of all Indians in America live in poverty. Now, let's look at education. What percentage of them have bachelor's degrees? What percentage of them have master's or MBAs? And what degrees they have? Look at this here. In 2021, 80% of Indian immigrants over 25 years old or older reported having at least a bachelor's degree versus only a third of all foreign-born and U.S.-born adults. Again.
Yeah, because here's the thing. With your master's degree or whatever degree you have, the fact of the matter is you're not going to get the same type of pay that would allow you to live the same lifestyle as your American parents as well as your American grandparents anymore, because our dollar is worth absolutely nothing. If you work in San Francisco, for example, you're not going to be able to afford to live in San Francisco. So what's going to happen is that you're going to have to spend 4 hours driving to work from whatever area outside of San Francisco you'll have to live in, because you can't afford to live in San Francisco. And then you're going to have to spend another 4 hours driving home. That's 8 hours. So between the 10-hour shift that you'll have to work in Silicon Valley and the 8-hour shift that you have to put in driving, that's 18 hours. So by the time you get home, you're probably going to get like about maybe 2.5 to 3 hours sleep. Now, for an Indian immigrant coming to the United States, okay, they'll do that no problem. And they'll do that for half the pay. So for the American who's born in the United States, whose parents, grandparents, great-grandparents are from the United States, when he looks at the lifestyle that his parents lived and his grandparents lived, he realizes, hey, wait a second, with all these qualifications and degrees that I have, I can't live the way my parents and grandparents lived. I can't afford to live in San Francisco, and I'm a doctor. I can't afford to live in San Francisco, and I'm a tech guy. So you know what? I'm just not going to compete. I'm just going to stay at home and watch television all day. In other words, what I'm trying to say to you, Patrick Bet David, and I think he already knows this, but this guy's always selling something. The fact of the matter is, it's not because these people are so much better than Americans. It's kind of like running a race against Usain Bolt, and you're a track guy. If Usain Bolt is going to start smoking cigarettes all day, and he's going to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's not eating right, and he's not practicing, and he's not working out, and he's not taking care of his body, and you got to run a race against him in a 100-meter dash, of course you're going to beat him. And the reason why you're going to beat him is because he's out of shape. It's because he's not doing what he's supposed to do. So of course you're going to win. And you're going to win because he doesn't give a damn anymore. But once he does what he's supposed to do, you're never going to beat him. If Americans were to really, really compete with these immigrants that Patrick Bet David is giving a crown to, they won't be able to compete. They won't be able to compete at all. If Americans who said, listen, you know what? We're going to go for it. These other immigrants, they don't stand a chance. But the reason why they stand a chance and they're able to move up, it's because Americans don't give a damn anymore. And that's what the whole situation is about.
80% of 25 and older have a degree, 4-year degree.
You're getting excited, man, and I just gave you the reason.
49% of Indian immigrants adults have at least a graduate or professional degree in 2021 compared to 15% of foreign.
It doesn't matter. I just said, with your degree, you can't afford to live in San Francisco. With your degree, you can't afford to live in Los Angeles. With your degree, you can't afford to live in Manhattan, New York City. With your degree, you can't afford to live in the best parts of Miami. That's what it is, because the dollar's not worth a damn anymore. That's what it is. What's going on here?
Of 25 and older have a degree, 4-year degree. 49% of Indian immigrants adults have at least a graduate or professional degree in 2021 compared to 15%.
But you're not going to get the same pay because they're actually paying these immigrants less money to do the same job. Because you see, listen, let's just say a tech job in Silicon Valley and you have a particular degree to perform a particular tech job in Silicon Valley. And let's just say that you know that you should be making $350,000 a year, right? And that's before taxes. But you notice with $350,000 a year, you can't live in San Francisco. So the Indian guy comes in and they give him $175,000 a year. And he has to spend 12 hours driving back and forth to work. He's gonna take that job because where he comes from, $175,000 a year is like $100 million to him. He can send money back to his family and everybody will be well. And you're not touching on these points, Patrick. You're making it seem as if these Indians are somehow smarter than Americans, and they're not. They're actually doing better than they would do in their own country. But for the most part, once you analyze the salary and how much time they would have to put into work and travel time just to make that salary. For an American, that's not a good deal at all. But let's just say that Americans decided, you know what, I would take less pay and I would really, really, really compete. These Indians will not stand a chance. And you know this.
Compared to 15% of foreign-born and 13% of U.S.-born, nearly 4 times of U.S.-born.
It doesn't matter what they major in.
What do they major?
They're making less money to do the same job.
Lots of people waste money on degrees that have no amount of high-paying jobs. Most people agree that you plan on going to college, you need to major in STEM to make it a good investment, but Indian Americans abide by this. It's like a religion. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Look at the chart here on what they major in.
The chart means nothing. They're still making less money. Listen, as an American, you're not going to take less money to do the same job. You're just not. You would prefer to not work because you're used to a certain lifestyle. No one's going to do that. You're not going to be able to pay a person in France less money for doing the same job. They would say no to it. But at the same time, if you were to bring in a bunch of Arabs into France and give them the same job for the same degree and pay them less, they'll take it because they have absolutely nothing in countries like Iran or Armenia. So they'll take it and they'll make the best of it and they'll live. And you'll have 5 and 6 and 7 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and they'll save that extra money over 10, 15 years. That's what they'll do because it's better than nothing. But for an American, nothing is better than nothing because they're just not going to go for it. They're not going to go for that.
And at the top, you see the blue, engineering 36%. Then it's math and computer science 35%. Then that 10% at the top, you see it? Business management. So they're intentional about what areas they're going to go major in.
And the salary that they make is intentionally less.
Go major in. Now let's go even a little bit deeper than this on how they measure amongst other ethnic groups. This is according to the U.S. Census Bureau. If you look at the top right, you'll see all immigrants. It's a darker blue. You'll see Indian immigrants. It's a lighter blue. And then you'll see U.S. born, okay? Furthest to the left is management, business, science, art occupations. Look who's in the middle. 79% of Indian immigrants versus 43% of U.S. born versus 37% of all immigrants. They major in management, business, and science. Look at service occupation. They're the lowest at 5%. U.S. is 15%, and all the other immigrants, 21%. They're like, no, you're not going to major in service when you're going into this. Look at sales and office occupation, 10%, 15%, 21%. National resource constitution maintenance occupation, they're 1%. It's almost as if you do go and major in that, you're going to get a lot of pop-up from your parents there, but it's a 1%, 8% for U.S. born, 12% from all immigrants. Then production, transportation, and material moving, 6, 13, 15. Look, they're not interested in that. You know what they're interested in? Management, business, science is what they're interested in. They want to do STEM. So obviously this leads to them making a lot of money. But
no, man. It's what the government allows you to do. For example, if you go to Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, you have a lot of Indian immigrants from India, and you have a lot of Filipino immigrants from the Philippines. But guess what? In Hong Kong, the Indian immigrants, they mainly do one type of job. And do you know what that type of job is? They deliver food to you on motorcycles. That's what they do. 99.999% of Indian immigrants that live and work in Hong Kong, they do food delivery. Now, in terms of the Filipinos that live in Hong Kong and that work in Hong Kong, 99.999% of them, they do the maids' work. They're all maids. 99.999% of them. And the reason for that is because in Hong Kong, the government does not allow those people to get the better jobs. So they're not going to allow Indian people in mass in Hong Kong to do tech jobs or banking, for example. And they're not going to allow Filipino women to do better jobs. For example, even jobs in tech and so on and so forth. No. The government in Hong Kong would keep the best jobs for their own people, for their own citizens. And they would not let a group of Indians just come in and just take over the tech jobs, because you can't take anything over unless the government allows you to take it over. So it's not as if these Indians are taking over these positions. These positions are being given to them because Americans, real Americans, they're not doing these jobs anymore because the pay is not sufficient. Patrick, Bet, David. You see, I'm just gonna let this guy keep going before I cut this thing off.
But let's look at business. Are they startup entrepreneurs? Do they produce billionaires? I don't know. Let's take a look. So here's what it looks like. According to Oxford Academic, Indian immigrants represent 1% of the U.S. population, but 8% of the founders of high-tech companies and 1/3 of technology startups in Silicon Valley. 1% of total.
Yeah, Patrick, Bet, David. But none of these startups or tech companies that Indian people own in Silicon Valley, none of these companies rival Microsoft or Apple or Amazon. So what is your point here? These are almost like, startup companies that's going to exist for 5 years and then they'll fade out. These are not major companies that's actually shifting the culture of technology companies in the United States or the world for that matter. Come on.
U.S. population, 8% of all founders. Here's some of the names of billionaires that produce. Jay Chaudhry, net worth $8.3 billion, CEO of Zscaler. Vinod Khosla, net worth $5.3 billion, former Sun Microsystem co-founder. Rome Wadhwani, $5.1 billion. Rakesh Ganwal, $4 billion, Indigo CEO, founder. Naresh Shah, CEO of Wayfair, $2.8 billion. Anil Bursi, net worth $2.3 billion, CEO of Workday. This is working on how they're...
And no one has ever heard of none of these tech companies. And if you were to add all these billions of dollars together, I mean, it's not even 1% of what a guy like, let's say, Donald Bren is worth. And he's a real estate developer. He's not even into tech. So what is your point, guy? You're talking about 5 guys that own tech companies or who have founded or co-founded tech companies that nobody knows anything about. None of these companies, separately or combined, rival Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, or any big companies for that matter. These guys are not shifting culture anywhere. So it is obvious that somebody's paying this guy to say this, but let's just keep going because I'm getting tired.
This is working on how they're producing and what they're majoring in. Now let's look at family perspective. What do they do that's different when it comes down to the family? Well, one thing that's interesting is it's very common for multiple Indian families to share a home while building a business together and continuously expanding the business. So it's almost like the concept of...
This is what happened in the United States before feminism. It was very common in the United States to be like that as well. This is not an Indian thing. This is a people thing. This is how you're supposed to exist in a family. And this is nothing that you need a prize for. But what has happened in the United States through media, etc., we've been sold large doses of feminism. And because of that, the family has started to fall apart. It's just that simple. It's not like these Indians got it figured out. No, it's because in India, they haven't been sold feminism the same way, Americans have been sold feminism. But if you look at modern day Indians today who were born in the United States, well, they've bitten off a big chunk of that feminism pie as well. So come on, Pat. But let's keep going.
Almost like the concept of delayed gratification. Hey, let's live together. Let's minimize expenses. Let's put all the money we're making back into the business rather than splurging and wasting money all over the place. Couple other things to be thinking about. When it comes down to divorce rates, did you know Indian Americans have the lowest divorce rates in America? Very interesting, right?
They got the lowest divorce rates because their marriages are all arranged. They're either passively arranged marriage or actively arranged marriages. In other words, an active arranged marriage would be you have to marry this guy, and if you don't, we'll send you back to India and stone you to death. And a passive arranged marriage is, I want you to marry this guy. I know you don't like him, but you have to marry him because if you don't marry him, then I'm going to stop talking to you for the rest of your life. But they're all arranged marriages.
Okay. Very interesting, right? Now, some of you are going to say, well, of course they have the lowest divorce rates in America because they have arranged marriages.
That is correct. They're either actively arranged or passively arranged. Just like your marriage, Patrick.
They may in India, but not necessarily all in America. It does happen.
It's all over the world. It's all over the world. If you're an Indian and you want to marry a certain man or a certain woman that your parents, especially your father, does not approve of, like I said, they can either stone you to death or they'll just, never talk to you again. Either way, they'll just disown you. And that's it.
It does happen, but it's not as high of a number as it is in India, and it's gradually going away anyways. But let's look at the stats here. According to National Center for Family and Marriage Research, blacks, they have the highest divorce rate, 30.8.
Yeah, because blacks have bitten off a big chunk of that feminist pie, and now they're choking on it.
Divorce rate, 30.8%. Hispanics are 18.5%. White.
Same for Hispanics, and now they're choking on it. But the thing with Hispanics is that, for the most part, Hispanic men beat their women into submission. Hispanic men are famous for beating their women and beating the hell out of their kids. That's what they do. That's how they get submission.
18.5%. Whites are 15.1%. Other is 12.4%. But for Indian families, you ready? There's some studies that say 1.3% and some that show 6%, but they're lower than anybody else when it comes down to this.
Yeah, but really, Patrick, come on, man. When it comes to what's most attractive in terms of what people look at and find most attractive, an Indian person is not going to be the first person that's going to come to the average person's mind or head. Okay, it's going to be the black person at the top, and it's going to be the white person, or, well, Hispanics and whites, they're the same. So it's going to be the black person at the top for sexual energy and just sexual ferocity, and then below that you'll have whites, and within that white group you're going to probably have Italians and then maybe Hispanics and that kind of thing. But nobody is looking at the average Indian person thinking that, like, no woman is looking at the average Indian man thinking that he's gonna break her back. It doesn't happen. And no man is necessarily going to look at the average Indian woman with bleach on her face, thinking that, wow, she's the epitome of beauty, she's so sexy, look at her round ass, look at the size of her breasts and that kind of stuff. No, sir. So, come on. People still tend in the United States to marry people that they are attracted to first, for the most part, because that's just how America is.
Obviously, some of it has to do with culture, ritual, all of that, but they have a lower divorce rate than others. Again, this is purely based on...
Yeah, because outside of their demographic, they're not as attractive as the other races. That's why, Patrick.
Statistics, couple other things. We looked at this website called indiaparenting.com, and we saw...
And that's what he's selling. He's actually selling indianparenting.com. I've been trying to figure this out. I finally got it. That's what it is. So indianparenting.com is sponsoring this segment of Patrick's show. That's the read-in for the ad right there. That's it. This is an ad. This is an infomercial for Indians. This is what it is.
And we saw these 10 things that they do as parenting that's different than others. Some of it you may say, I had some of that with my parents, or I apply some of it myself. And some of you may say, yeah, we definitely don't do that in America. Here, let me kind of go through it. Number one, they promote kinship. Indian parents make it a point to foster relationships and association with their social and family acquaintances. They edify their children to be in social connections and also maintain healthy connections with their relatives. More so, they stay as shelter beside their children till they are married off, right from the children's infant ages to their marriage times. Even after that, the parents support their youngsters emotionally in order to provide the much needed support. Ideal Indian parents create a social environment where the concept of family is expanded to all. So they're selling.
No, sir. That's not an Indian thing. Indians did not invent that. That's traditional parenting. That's traditional family values. That was once practiced in the United States before feminism came into play and pretty much broke up the whole family value system. The United States of America was just like that. All of those points that you pointed out that Indian people practice to this day, in the United States, we all practice that before the days of feminism. Once feminism came into play, the American family started breaking down. Brick by brick, layer by layer by layer by layer. So I don't understand what you're getting at, but I understand what you're doing, Patrick. You've been paid to run an infomercial for the Indian community, and hopefully they paid you well. But that's about it. I'm not going to keep going at this because, I'm just making the same points over and over and over. But let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.